This video includes an ad for Squarespace. Welcome back to the workshop. We're still working on the furniture for the apartment that we spent the last almost 2 years now completely renovating and building all the furniture for. Luckily, as we get closer to the finish line, the projects get smaller and smaller. Starting from a huge kitchen, the last project was a wardrobe, and now we're making another wardrobe bar for a hallway for jackets and stuff. That wardrobe is gonna go right here, replacing all of this, which is our current wardrobe setup consisting of this old cabinet that was here when we bought the apartment. And I'm pretty sure this thing has been in every single room of the house during the renovation, and we must have moved it at least a dozen times. It's really small, really rickety. To sort of make it a little bit more convenient, at one point we had a coat hanger on the wall there. But for the last month or so, our jackets just live there and the shoes are just sort of underneath. I've spent the last couple of days putting together this framework here. This is the rough outline of what we're gonna build. And Vilde here has been amazing and has been edge banding all the parts that will become all the doors and drawer fronts for this entire cabinet. And you've become quite good at this, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
So what Vilde is doing right now is essentially covering up the edges of these boards, which have an MDF core with a thin strip of actual oak wood, that once all the sides are covered, this will essentially look like a solid piece of oak. So we're essentially jumping in at the halfway mark of this project. Like most other projects, these parts start their life as a big stack of material. I then spend a bunch of time cutting really large sheets of wood into smaller and smaller sheets of wood that are closer and closer to the final size that they need to be at. And then after a whole bunch of work, including putting together some drawers, we're left at this thing. Okay, that's the end of the video. Thanks for watching. Joking. This is such a similar project to a lot of the other stuff I built, and that's why I'd rather focus on the new and fun parts of this project, the parts where I get to come up with cool solutions and actually spend a bit of time thinking about them. Now, my favorite part of this project is gonna be how we solve these doors. Because this is gonna be in the hallway where there's really not a lot of space between this door and the back of our kitchen. Having a massive set of doors open up like this would block the entire path and make it super inconvenient. So instead of really large doors, I made a set of really skinny doors to make folding doors just like this, so that they take up a lot less space. So the biggest challenge of this video is going to figure out how to do that using just off-the-shelf hardware, and I guess making it both look and function good. And now, while I'm doing that, for the parts that are already done and sanded and ready to be oiled, again, Vilde is currently doing that and doing a great job at it. She's actually the one that's oiled and finished about 90% of all the furniture that we built so far in the apartment. You want to explain the process?
I did.
And once this has had a little bit of time to soak in, it's just a matter of wiping it all back off, or as much as you can, and you're left with a really nice finish. Right, let's get cracking on those doors. So the first step to get these bifold doors to actually work is pretty much gonna be the same as for any other cabinet door. Mounting plates, the same ones as I always use. And for the doors themselves, I'm gonna try and make this work using regular cabinet door hinges. These are inset, and the holes are already drilled using the jig. And now these things just snap into place just like that. So I can now click all of these in place. Right, so far so good. That's the easy part done. The way I'm planning to attach these two pieces together is with this really cool hinge called the piano hinge. These are really neat because you can get them in all sorts of lengths, all the way up to like multiple meters when they come in a roll. What's so nice about these is that they fold together really nice and flat, so they have a pretty small footprint, but since they're so long, they're still really strong. And to get the right distance between these, I just happen to have a 2mm piece of brass. I'll just drop in there, smush this together, make sure everything is aligned properly, because these hinges are not adjustable. Start with a couple, just to see if this thing actually works. I mean, this thing fell out. Oh, this didn't make it any easier, at least. My first time actually trying this. I mean, what do I expect? And then the idea is that instead of doing this, which would take up a whole bunch of the space of this really narrow hallway. It should be able to do... all right, okay. I don't know why I didn't buy the longer hinges. Obviously, this is pretty flimsy. It both opens really weirdly and has the ability to go all the way in. And I think we'll be able to fix all of those things by making a track at the bottom and the top in which some sort of geometry in this door can ride and make sure that it slides up and close like this. But to do that, unfortunately, I have to disassemble the whole thing. So this whole project is going to become a lot of disassembling, testing, reassembling, and probably doing that a couple of times. Right, first attempt, I've cut the groove for a pin, which I've inserted into the top here to slide into. So now, I mean, it does it, but there are a few things that we still need to figure out. For starters, the sliding action isn't super nice. I thought that I could get away with just using a shelf pin and having it ride in the track here. Turns out that's not quite smooth enough, so we're gonna change that shelf pin to one of these small bearings here that should hopefully make it a lot smoother. That means, again, disassembling the whole thing, making a bigger groove for this to ride into. Because of the nature of these hinges, they're made to butt up against something on the inside. This one doesn't do that, so now I'm left with this kink. So we'll need to make a stop lock that stops this from closing too much. There's a risk of that interfering with the groove and the bearing and all of that. So my plan is to just ignore that problem for now and then solve it with some 3D printing later on. Which means that we can disassemble the whole thing, router those new grooves, and then just hope for the best that I was able to solve this with the 3D printing once we assemble it back home. However, there's one more thing I want to do before we start sanding these, and that is creating a nice round edge on what is going to become my little shelf that sticks out. Can't help myself. Of course, I've 3D printed a jig for this. This is going to work the same way as the floating shelf I made. Cut it out roughly with the jigsaw, and then take this thing, clamp it to the bottom, and then router the whole thing out with a following wheel on the router. And as easy as that, you got a nice round curve, and this thing is completely reusable. And again, just because I can, this is the side piece, there's this little cutout, and I'm gonna make these edges a little bit nicer and smoother. So I've also 3D printed the curvature for both of those, which I'll just clamp on and round off. That whole thing for both of them took literally just 2 minutes. Now finally, this is the very last piece. Sanding always takes such a long time, but luckily, Mercant just came out with a new sander that they've sent me. This is an upgrade of my all-time favorite sander, Darrow's. This one is number 2. And you might be able to spot the difference. This is my old one, this is the new one. It's now 175 millimeters, which makes sanding large flat surfaces like this a lot easier. And that were, Jesus, the 2 last pieces. And while I've been sanding, build this again, been hard at work, oiling all of these parts. Drying rack, by the way, works super well. You having fun? Oh, you're not done yet? You're slacking. We'll finish up these last ones, and then we'll see you back home to install all of this. But first, a quick ad from today's sponsor, Squarespace. So normally when I'm not building furniture for my own apartment, I'm making design stuff here in my workshop. And I sell the build plans and 3D files for those projects on my website. A website which I built using Squarespace. And you can now start building a completely personalized website with their new guided design system, Squarespace Blueprint. Choose from professionally curated layout and styling options to build unique online presence from the ground up. Tailored to your brand or business and optimized for every device. So Squarespace is a huge part of the reason why I'm able to do what I do. I actually started using their service to sell my products online even before they started sponsoring my videos. On my website, I sell build plans and 3D files. But whether you want to sell digital or physical products, Squarespace has the tools you need to start selling online. That includes a seamless checkout process where you can accept both PayPal, credit cards, and Apple Pay, and in select countries even offer the option to buy now and pay later with Afterpay or ClearPay. Head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, head to squarespace.com/ALCH for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. At least the projects keep getting smaller and smaller, but man, I hate carrying stuff up the stairs. Anyways, I've filled the entire living room with all the parts for this cabinet. It's time to finally get rid of that thing. Now I want this cabinet to cover most of the ugly stuff right here. But I want to save a little bit of history. I want it to go just past the fuse box and leave a little bit of this old wood paneling exposed. So that together with this awesome brick wall that Vilde spent so much time perfectly restoring, we'll be able to see a little bit of the history of this building. Like this wood paneling might very well be over 100 years old. And there's multiple cracks, a bunch of old layers of paint. People have scratched it, drilled into it, and it's just survived so long that it would be a shame to just cover everything up. Now to make enough room for a cabinet, I've had to remove the last little bit of drywall, digging out hidden screws. An old drywall almost feels nostalgic. I'm not sure if it's in a good way though. Missed one. Classic. So I'm okay if I don't have to do that anytime soon again. Now as it comes to assembling this cabinet, this beautiful old wall is also going to be the source of probably the biggest challenge in this build. And that is this wall is in no way straight. As it touches at the top, we're left with a huge gap at the bottom. Luckily, I was aware of this before I started building. That's why I've left a good bit of additional material on the back edge of all the pieces. So I'm now gonna take my time, get everything lined up, scribe both side panels so that they match the crookedness of the wall, so that we should hopefully manage to get a nice transition between this old and new. Don't cut into the table. Vilde will kill me. Wah. So far so good. Both the sides are on and I got both of those to fit pretty well. I was pretty happy with myself. Put the top back on and then I realized that I have a problem. This side's nice and flush. I go over to the other side and there's a big gap. There's a bulge in the wall here that I hadn't accounted for. I measured that side, but did not think to measure the middle. So I thought a bit about it. At first I considered cutting out the drywall behind me, but what I think I'll do instead is to cut a wedge shape out of the top here. At the bottom here, there's actually plenty of room. And the consequence of that will be that the back wall inside the wardrobe will sit at a slight angle. Now, luckily, the way I've chosen to attach the back wall to this is the reason I'm able to do it. Because normally, just like I did for the wardrobe in the bedroom, I would just attach the back wall straight to the back of the entire cabinet. But since all the walls are crooked and sort of offset to each other, and because I'm not covering up the sides, I've come up with a different solution, which is this nice piece of oak that I've cut to size and made a really nice round over, mitered the edges, all the way around the inside. I shortened the top point by 1 centimeter, cut diagonally. That piece is 1 centimeter shorter the whole length. Now you can see the offset, just need to offset that one. And the other side is also perfectly against the wall. Cookie, biscuit. No, I forgot to attach the back wall first. Ah! No, do we need that back wall? No. No? No. What? Vilde said it's okay, so it's okay. Well, it was in fact not okay because without the top wall, the whole top section was just way too flimsy, and that would have just caused a lot of trouble later on. So, yep, had to remove the whole thing back out again, attach the buck wall, slid it back into place. Next up, the fun bit, the folding doors. Now, I did say that I was gonna fix the sliding mechanism before we came to the point to install these, and I think I've sorted it out. So this is what I've come up with. It's essentially just a 3D printed part that replaces the shelf in that I had in there earlier with a roller bearing, which should hopefully smoothen up that whole sliding mechanism a whole lot. And I'm actually quite proud of the solution that I come up with here, because the 3D printed part has a captive nut that allows me to attach the bearing with the screw into it, and then the bracket itself fits into a pocket, which I've routed out on both edges of this just MDF door, and I'm holding everything in place with 3 long screws going into the MDF. Ha! And we should now have a folding door. I mean, this thing works. This just, can you hear this? Now, what that sound I think comes from is just really, really cheap bearings. I bought a whole bunch of bearings on the internet a long time ago. They were dirt cheap. Now, luckily, I did cheat a little bit because I've already tried this a couple of days ago. Enough time for me to order new, higher quality bearings, which I've already replaced in this second door. So now it goes from this to, huh? That's pretty nice. That's a lot better. So I'm now just quickly switching out the second set of bearings because that really made a huge difference. And I just think the fact that the whole thing is essentially just a wooden speaker box just amplified the sound of those other bearings so much. They would have probably been totally fine for a lot of other applications. So I'll still hang on to them. We need a little bit more light in here while we work. Now, conveniently, that's built right into the wardrobe. You saw earlier that I routed in the groove for a light strip. I've now also installed these 2 little sensors up here. They're fitted into a little casing, 3D printed of course. And what's really neat is that the light stays on until all the doors close, and if just one of the doors open, the light goes back on. The way this geometry works is that once they open fully, they open sort of past the point where I can close them again by just pushing on the outside. So I end up having to pull it back from the inside here. Second problem is that right now the door closes too much as well. So you end up with this indent here because these hinges aren't meant for bifold doors. I'll solve the first problem with these little stop blocks that will fit inside the track and keep the door from opening too much. And the second problem with this little part that has an O-ring that will screw down there, which will keep it from closing too much. So now with that stop block attached, the door doesn't jam anymore. And when you close it, it now closes perfectly flush. And actually the geometry of this bearing holder is what allows us to use this stop block, because the big radius I've got on there allows us the clearance to have this stop block here. And now funny enough, as opposed to the last wardrobe I built where I used 3D printed handles, this time I've attached some nice wooden ones. And no, I didn't make these myself, these are bought, but I really like the way they look. And now I'm just super happy with the way this sliding door both functions and looks. All that's left is some drawers and cabinet fronts, and we're done with this project. And that's it. This thing is completely done. Complete with all the doors, all the drawers, everything is in here. There's so much more space here than what we had before. The fuse box is nicely hidden, yet super easily accessible still. And at the bottom here, we've got some massive drawers. This will be for bottles and recycling and all of that stuff. Some more storage on the bottom. And then, of course, at the top, might as well, these didn't get fancy handles, just push open cabinets. And of course, double sliding doors. Everything actually worked out really well. It's plenty big enough for a bunch of jackets. I love the light. And man, I just love the fact that both of them perfectly soft close, everything lines up, and it really feels like this is an off-the-shelf bifold door mechanism. Down at the bottom here, we've got storage for a bunch of shoes. It was really important to still have that floor at the very bottom, because in the winter, when your shoes are dirty and wet, this is a heated floor, so it nicely dries it up overnight. And you know what? This cutout has like a surprising amount of impact in how tight and narrow this space feels. Because let's face it, this is a pretty narrow hallway, but because of this, as you enter the room here, it really feels a bit more spacious than it maybe is. Well, hey, that's it for now. Thank you for watching. See you guys in the next one.